It is March 1854. The door of 8th Mexican President Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna swings open as a panicked messenger runs to his desk. "Mr. President, horrible news," the messenger proclaims, panting as cold sweat runs down his red face. Antonio stands up, a look of worry in his eyes and a slight tremor in his legs. The president makes eye contact with the unconsolable messenger, attempting to hold a stature of strength. "We have lost full control of Baja California," the messenger stutters. "We have no information, not the size of the army, if it's rebels or an invasion, nothing. The borders of Sonora have also been breached." The president slowly sits backwards as he crosses his arms, his gaze set forward. "Send men to deal with it," he says in a defeated voice. Much time passes, every second between spent with fear. The president sits in his office, with purple eye bags and a frown plastered on his unshaved face. His arms crossed, he remains in his office, every minute lacking knowledge of the grueling war spent in despair. Then suddenly the door swings open once more, the bright smiling face of the presidential messenger contrasting against that of fear which he presented on the day of the invasion. With joy in his walk, he steps forward as he presents the president with an update. The war is finished. The president quickly springs to his feet. "Thanks to the glorious Mexican army," he proclaims, his fists closed and doing a victory fist pump. No, they gave up themselves," the messenger declares. "What?" Antonio asks, a look of confusion on his face. "How many enemy forces were there?" 45, the messenger replies. This story takes place amidst the most contentious time in the United States history. During the 1850s leading up to the Civil War, the country was stuck in a debate: state rights versus human rights. Whilst the North had rapidly industrialized and thus were much wealthier than their southern counterparts, the latter were forced to rely predominantly on the cotton industry, which was kept afloat by slavery. The southern states viewed their ability to conduct slavery as a basic right, which allowed them to maintain their economy. Thus, they attempted to do so by increasing their leverage within Congress through the formation of the most states. With the Missouri Compromise, which prevented slavery states north of the 3630 latitude line, they then began to look south. This is where Manifest Destiny comes in, a political ideology which argued that white Americans had the right to settle territory throughout the entirety of continental North America, and in turn expand its borders. This prompted a large influx of Americans to begin to conduct military operations throughout the continent in the interest of America, and expanding her borders or claiming the territory as their own. These people were called filibusters, although the practice was common enough for filibustering to have been criminalized within United States law, with dozens of cases, none are more famous than WilliamWalker. Born in 1824 in Nashville, Tennessee, Walker grew up in a wealthy and politically connected family. A highly intelligent lad, he graduated from college at the age of 14 and studied to become a doctor by 17. Soon after, he resettled in New Orleans, Louisiana, working part-time as a newspaper editor at the New Orleans Daily Crescent whilst studying law. Editing newspapers detailing filibustering expeditions, the words written within the papers by Walker reflected a strong sense of sympathy for the idea. This can most predominantly be observed within the case of Venezuelan-born Cuban filibuster Narcisio Lopez, who in 1848 conducted an invasion of Cuba in support of its independence from Spain, and subsequent establishment as a pro-slavery republic. Accompanied alongside American mercenaries and funded by plantation owners in the South, Lopez's expedition soon ended in failure. In support of the invasion, Walker wrote, "There is no laws of nations, recognized in this country at least, nor all morals, which deprives a man of the right of expatriating himself if he pleases, to take his share in a foreign quarrel, which appeals to his love of liberty, or detestation of tyranny, or even to his more sordid estimate of glory and gain." Although to many, Walker seemed to be nothing more than a radicalized supporter of filibustering, this fact was soon disproved as Walker attempted to conduct his first military operation, initially commencing through diplomatic means, having visited Mexico with the aim of purchasing a private mining colony in the state of Sonora. However, as the Mexican government suspected the man of aiming to use the territory for grander means than simply just making a profit. He was ultimately kicked out. Enraged, Walker set out on foot from his new home in San Francisco alongside a small private army to invade Sonora. However, his plans were soon put to rest as he was stopped before he could even exit the city's limits. In October of 1853, Walker and 45 mercenaries set out from San Francisco to Baja California in the ship known as the Caroline and landed at the city of La Paz. The minimally defended city was quickly occupied by the mercenary troops, who subsequently declared the Republic of Lower California and later the Republic of Sonora, with WilliamWalker as its president, doing so with a symbolic lowering of the Mexican flag as they replaced it with that of the new republic. The governor and other officials were placed upon the Caroline as Walker and his new men awaited the arrival of other mercenaries before continuing their operation. A political system identical to that of the state of Louisiana was instilled, including the legalization of slavery, as many mercenaries from California traveled southwards, expecting to find a strong 1,000-man army occupying a land of opportunity. Their opinions immediately began to shift as they arrived. Exhausted, following a man who had zero plans, aggressive local ranchers, invading a foreign land of almost 8 million, being harassed by Mexican cavalry, under-equipped, and many of the men stripped half-naked, desertion became rampant, with the once keen fighters going back home. Upon realizing that their mission could not be achieved, the previously optimistic Walker, who previously aimed to establish a republic incorporating the entirety of Lower California and Sonora, and to have both of them annexed into the United States as slavery subdivisions, ultimately surrendered to US forces along the border. Although the actions of Walker's mercenary groups were condemned by the governments of Mexico and the United States, the public presented a highly supportive attitude, viewing Walker as a champion of manifest destiny. Many keen followers offered to join him within future expeditions. In fact, this supportive public opinion shifted the prosecuting court to acquit the man of all crimes in just 8 minutes, despite a clear violation of America's neutrality laws. Despite Walker's job shifting back to editing for newspapers, there were 300 men willing to join him as mercenaries in a war. Walker set his attention down south once more, focusing primarily on Central America. Well informed on global politics, Walker set his sights on the Republic of Nicaragua. In a state of anarchy, the state's treasury was exhausted, and the country was in a brutal successionist civil war between the servile and democratic parties. However, he planned in doing so under the title of a colonist opposed to a filibuster, as to avoid being prosecuted for breaking the United States neutrality laws once more. On the 4th of May 1855, Walker and 65 mercenaries set sail south in the Vesta ship after being invited to fight alongside the Democratic Party. They landed on Nicaragua's west coast on the 11th of June, soon linking up with their new allies at the city of Leon. Joined by 58 of his own men and 100 Nicaraguans, they embarked at Real Lajo before landing at Agua Cayudo, close to San Juan del Sur. It was nearby in the city of Rivas, where Walker and his men encountered combat for the first time. Faced with a force 500 men strong, a bloody battle took place in which almost the entirety of the native Nicaraguans deserted, and the Americans suffered significant casualties. Thus, this prompted Walker to retreat to the coast before returning to Real Lajo once more. A second battle took place at Rivas on the 2nd of September, as Walker's army had 120 native Nicaraguans under his command and 58 Americans, with many consisting of new arrivals from California. This time, the Filibuster troops won. Following this, Walker's army began their march for Virgin Bay between the 10th to 11th of October, boarding the Virgin ship and streaming towards the at the time capital city of Grenada, landing around 6.4 kilometers or 4 miles north. Using the element of surprise, entering the city in the middle of the night, they silently took in between 300 to 400 servile soldiers as prisoners, despite being joined by no more than 110 troops, with around 10 casualties. At this point, he officially gained control over the state, declaring himself president, establishing English as the official language, and legalizing slavery. At the peak of his power, the word of Walker's victory rapidly began to spread as 1,000 men in support of his cause of expansionism of slavery states and manifest destiny entered Nicaraguan territory to join the newly formed army. Despite gaining full de facto control over the state, only one country recognized Walker as having legitimate control over Nicaragua, that being the United States. However, to say that Walker's presidency over Nicaragua was poorly managed would be the understatement of the century. Suppressing the non-white population of the country and legalization of slavery prompted the local population to be highly opposed to his presence within their country, not a good idea when the suppressed make up the country's vast majority. Walker also seized a steamship owned by New York-based millionaire and at the time America's richest man, Cornelius Vanderbilt, declaring them to be property of Nicaragua. This in turn caused Vanderbilt to send mercenaries of his own to Central America to overthrow Walker's government. Walker's poor use of diplomacy also made many enemies, including the United States, who soon withdrew their recognition. The Central American nations of Guatemala, Honduras, and Costa Rica refused to hold communication with Nicaragua, with the latter expelling Nicaragua's commissioner, prompting Nicaragua to declare war. Yeah, you can see where this is going. Costa Rica began to invade Nicaragua alongside Vanderbilt's mercenaries, occupying Rivas before retreating due to a cholera outbreak. It was after this conflict that Walker publicly announced the fact that he believed it not to be worth continuing his presidency, announcing his resignation in June 1856. Elections were held, which Walker won. This even infuriated Walker's allies, who quickly joined the side of the anti-Walker coalition, who once more led an invasion, prompting him to resign a second time. Upon returning home to the United States, Walker once more received a hero's welcome, particularly within the South. This simultaneously applied to his trial. Again, he was acquitted of any charges. As the former president began to live a normal life, shifting back to editing newspapers, his supporters once more began to offer themselves to fight by his side in his wars. This prompted Walker to begin his next war in 1860, as he set his attention down south to Central America again. On his first attempt at conquest, his ship collided with a coral reef off the coast of Belize, and he was towed off to Mobile, Alabama by the British Navy. After this, he attempted an invasion of Costa Rica, but was arrested by the US Navy. Walker's final invasion plan was initiated later that year, as he, alongside 91 men, attempted to regain control over Nicaragua once more. His plan involved landing on the Honduran port of Trujillo and marching south into his former colony. However, the invasion didn't go as planned. The small militia just barely managed to squeeze itself into the port through the British ships keeping guard to prevent American filibusters from entering Central American waters. On the beaches, Walker's mercenaries were met with resistance from the Honduran military, who immediately opened fire, inflicting dozens of casualties, which were further increased by the tropical diseases. Ultimately, Walker was forced into surrender by the British ships offshore, with Commodore Norval Salmon ensuring him that he would be treated well by the Hondurans. Walker reluctantly agreed, but to put it simply, let's just say that the man regretted his actions as he stood with his hands behind his back and blindfolded in front of a Honduran firing squad.